Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you with us. My name is David Mattis. I'm the Executive Director of the Southwestern Association of Episcopal Schools. We work with over 100 schools in 6 states in the Southwest, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. This is one of our partner webinars, which means that we've invited a partner association, the education group, to join us as we talk about today's topic, which is getting excited and getting ready to become a head of school. So we've got a great panel that David will introduce in just a moment. But before I turn it over to him, I'd like to do a couple of housekeeping items. First, you should see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So the Q&A button will be the way that you submit questions to the panelists. And I would encourage you, as things pop up, collect those questions, put those in the Q&A box, and then we'll handle all those questions, hopefully get them all answered before we finish today. So I'd like to take the Q&A box for a test drive. Y'all will click on the Q&A box and type in the city that you are appearing from, the city that you're joining us from, and let's see if the Q&A box is working for us. Also, that'll give us an idea to see all the different cities that are presented. So we've got Austin, Chattanooga, Beijing, Houston, Locust Grove, Virginia. Yeah, we've got all sorts of great cities, San Francisco. So the Q&A box is working really well. So again, don't lose a question. If a question pops up, get it into the Q&A box. I'll be keeping a close eye on that and making sure we get all your questions answered. The other item I wanted to make sure you know how to use is the chat box. Some of y'all have already used the chat box. That's a great way to communicate with us as well. There may be times throughout the webinar where we'll ask y'all to throw out different ideas, or did this work for you, or maybe it didn't work for you. The chat box is a great way for you to communicate as well. The one thing I would suggest is that you change your chat box setting to all panelists and attendees. The default setting is just for the panelists to see what you write in, and we would like for everyone to be able to see everyone's chat. So if you'll change that to all panelists and attendees, that way we can have some conversation going on while David and our other presenters are sharing some really valuable information with you. So again, welcome to this webinar. I'm going to turn it over to David Dougherty to introduce the panelists. David.
David, thank you very much. We appreciate all you've done to help us organize this first ever webinar for newly appointed school heads, sponsored, as David has said, by SAES and by our group, the education group. I'm David Dougherty. For 44 years in independent school education, I was a teacher and administrator, then the headmaster of a school, Roanoke, Virginia, North Cross School, and then finally, for 19 years, I was the head of the Hill School outside Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am now the director of the executive coaching program for TEG, the education group. It's a program designed to help, to support, to mentor school heads, and in particular, new school heads. I'm joined today by Susan Layer, who for 46 years was in independent school education, 17 of them as head of St. Francis in Houston, Texas. And by Bob Kirkpatrick, who for 42 years was in private schools, including 7 as the head of Fox Chapel Country Day in Pittsburgh, and 9 years as head of St. Stephen's in Austin, Texas. We have obviously been around the block. We've been there and done that in wonderful independent schools. And several years ago, we looked for an opportunity to pay all of that back. To express our gratitude for wonderful careers, wonderful lives in independent schools. And we saw the opportunity and frankly the need to do that by supporting new heads of school with a program that we ourselves have designed, an executive coaching program for new heads. Today, we are here first to congratulate you on your appointment as a head of school. I guess from the start to assure you that the search committee at your new school got it right. Your experience, your wisdom, your knowledge from years of education have been rewarded and will reward a school that you will now head. You're ready for this. And while in some of the writing I've done about it, I've talked about both the excitement and the anxiety of it. Those butterflies are good butterflies. They are healthy ones that are going to prime you even more for the work ahead. There is one thing new that I should alert you to at the start, and that is the fact that as a head of school, the buck will stop with you. You are the decider, or the court of last appeal. And in that regard, I might set us up right now with a story told years ago by a cardinal of the Catholic Church, Carol Joseph Wojtyła, who shortly after he was elected Pope John Paul II, was in conversation with one of his colleagues, one of his friends, who gave him an especially neat, good idea. And Wojtyła said then, "That's a wonderful idea. Thank you. I really should talk to the Pope about that." And then he smiled and said, "Oh my goodness, I am the Pope." And that's where you are right now. You are the head of a school. And with that go all of the responsibilities and opportunities that attend that position. We know from experience that the next 5.5 months are pivotal to it. The transition time has begun. We will continue all the way through your first year, but this is a period that frankly is not given as much attention as it should receive in the life of a new head. And that's why we've devoted this time conversation, ideally, not a lecture, not a PowerPoint presentation, but an opportunity for all of us to share concerns, share opportunities to talk about what happens between now and the 1st of July, when you will report officially for your new work. Where else are you going to get almost 30 of you with a very common experience and common background to be here in one place at one time to talk about such things? So that's it. That's why we're here right now. And we posed some questions for you a few days ago with our emails to tee you up for this. Fortunately, I promise this came unexpectedly. We got a question last night from a new head, and I asked Bob to take it on. It is a whopper of a question. It's take us a good long time. But Bob at least has had a little time to deal with it, and let him tell you what the question is and have a go at it. Bob, good luck.
Yeah, I mean, the question, it's the $64,000 question, given the theme of our webinar. Before I start, welcome everybody. Glad that you could join us. The question is, what's the most important thing I should be doing between now and July 1 to prepare for my responsibilities? And then there was a second question submitted that asked about the makeup and the role of the transition team or committee. And I'll try to roll all this into one response if I can. The best advice I can give you is to plan. And I know that sounds overly simplistic, but I think the best advice I can give you is to plan. Work with your transition team at your new school to create a transition plan that'll include several key elements, and I'll talk about those in just a second. Begin, though, by making sure that your school has a transition team or a committee in place. The essential task of that team or that committee is to help you develop and implement a transition plan. It's a collaborative process, but it's the school's responsibility to begin to set up this mechanism as the search is ending and as the transition begins. And it's something actually that we as search consultants find ourselves doing more and more, and that is helping schools set up this transition process. We even advise schools to appoint a transition chair before the selection process concludes, so that the school and you can move smoothly into this transition. Keep the transition committee or the transition team relatively small in size, functional, representative of the school community as well, because what you want to signal is community empowerment, buy-in, responsibility. That's really important. For continuity's sake, you'd want to include a couple trustees, maybe a member of the search committee, but also look to the staff, look to the parent leadership for representation in this, on this committee. Those of you, those who are helping you coordinate this, your transition committee, for example, need to understand the phases through which all transitions must go. Because if you understand this, it helps to manage expectations others may have of you, including the fact that most of you still have a full-time job. So managing expectations means helping people understand the essential tasks that are undertaken in these various stages of transition. Let me give you some examples. The pre-entry period. It's essentially, it's where you are now. It's from the appointment all the way up through your arrival on campus in the summertime. You know, information's being gathered, relationships are being built during this period. The arrival period during the summer, when attending to the logistics of your move and your family's needs ought to be at the top of the list. The first semester, listening, observing, learning are key tasks during that period. In the second semester, more of this knowing and being known, but also beginning to address some board-approved goals and priorities. And then finally, as you approach the summer after your first year, that stage we like to call decompression. Summertime reflection on the year that's just passed and your first year there, but also goal setting and thinking about what comes next in the next school year. Point is, this is a process, and there are stages through which you and the school community should go. It doesn't mean you won't have to fight fires. We wish we could say we didn't, but it's a fact of life. It doesn't mean you don't have to fight fires. It doesn't mean you don't have to attend to the day-to-day. But it's important to keep these primary tasks in mind at these points in your transition. The transition committee or your team can help you develop a means for gathering information about the school, whether it's the history or the programs or the operational structure, budget, strategic goals, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, you name it. Gather key documents, put them in one place, use them, study them. Seek vital information through targeted conversations that you have with school staff and trustees, and especially with your board chair. That'll be a theme that we'll be touching on throughout, is your relationship with your board chair. The transition plan itself is a guide to building, and should be a guide to building relationships with all the school's constituents, especially, again, the board chair. So specify how and when and why these relationships are going to be built, and you and your family are going to be welcomed over the course of the transition. And do this both prior to and following your arrival. There's this sense on the part of some that once you've arrived that the transition ends. In fact, in some ways it's just beginning. Be very clear and have the transition committee and have your board chair help define the role of the current head during the transition, including, as it might be appropriate, obviously celebrating the exiting head's contributions to the school. You'll also want to affirm the fact that the current head is still in charge, which is not to suggest that you won't be having conversations, that you won't be collaborating and sharing with one another on personnel matters, things of that sort. But by and large, it's important to understand, important for the community to understand that the head is still the head of school and in charge of the school. And you also want to indicate what the role of the head should be in support of the transition. And that ought to be a very specific understanding that you have going through this transition. You and the transition committee and the board need to acknowledge and account for what I guess we would say is the obvious, that there will be anxiety out there during this time of change and challenge. So it's really important to represent this as a time of opportunity. You know, when all that's good about the school and its future should be underscored or emphasized. It's critically important to project confidence and pride in the school going forward, just as important to your early success and to the health of your community, if not more so, than focusing on what might need to be fixed. So that sense of confidence going forward is critical and needs to be reinforced by key members of the transition team and the school leadership. Create a schedule of visits and an agenda for each that establishes the means by which all this learning and relationship building is going to take place. 2 or 3 visits, several days apiece, if you live a distance away, or if you live relatively close by, monthly visits of shorter duration might be appropriate, depending on your responsibilities at your current school and on your new school's calendar, obviously. Also important during this period is establishing clarity about the board's charge to you and the goals that you and the board have worked together to set for your first year. You need, and they need, that focus as you go through this transition period. David can agree with this. We find ourselves spending more and more time with boards late in the search and during the transition, just to make sure that their relationship with and their responsibility to you as the new head are made clear. This transition period is a great time for boards to sort of get all their ducks in a row in terms of their alignment with governance best practice. Clear to say that boards need attention during the transition as well. You know, it's to sort of summarize, it's too easy for transitions and the successful launch of a headship to go awry without an approach to the transition from the appointment through the first year that's intentional and carefully planned. Once worked with a school for whom we didn't do the search, but late in the transition period, we were asked to help with executive coaching. And we'd identified a number of gaps in the transition process that clearly had an impact on the head's early performance. So we did a transition inventory, I guess it's fair to say, with the board chair. And the things that they had done that might appear on our list of transition musts were done almost as a matter of convenience or almost by accident. There was no well-conceived transition plan in place. And frankly, and the struggles the head was having, that was part of their problem. So planning is key, and addressing in your transition plan these and other elements is really critical going forward.
David, can I jump in, David, and ask
Yeah,
Bob a
do
follow-up
that.
question?
Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bob, I want to go back to when you mentioned the transition book or collecting the different documents as part of that transition, or whatever you want to call that. I'd love to drill down a little bit and see if we could come up with a list of what documents would you love to see in that book. What documents should the incoming head ask to see? So things that come to mind immediately for me are the bylaws. Obviously, I'm coming from the accreditation world, so I'd love to see a copy of the most recent OSB report or on-site visit report. But
and the follow-up letters, the accreditation letters,
interim reports, all that. What else would be, for these folks that are about to step into that role, what documents specifically would you ask them to make sure they get their hands on?
Yeah, when we work with schools, beyond the search and in the transition, we give them a sample list of about 30 items. Once you get started, it's hard to stop. So whether it's a strategic plan, you said accreditation report, however many years of financials, the school budget, board bylaws, sometimes the schools will have gone through or in the process of doing strategic planning. So even a self-study is something that you might want to share with them. Curriculum guides, those kinds of things. Other documents that deal with personnel issues and benefits, salaries and benefits that the business office can give you. The list is a long one, and I think most of the people with whom we're talking right now can think right offhand of any number of things that they'd like to have. The point is this, and I've talked to heads where this wasn't done, and they spent a lot of time early on in their tenure running errands and chasing down documents that may or may not have existed.
Right.
And so think of it this way, you need to have these things at your fingertips. And you need to also have this transition book in whatever form it takes, digital or otherwise. You need to have that at your disposal as a primer. I mean, you need to start learning about the school, and a lot of that you can do by scanning, by reading these documents, or examining these documents on your own time. So I think you have to be expansive in thinking about what kinds of documents does the school have or put out routinely that I need to be familiar with and will help me learn more about not only my role, but the school itself.
Great. We could all, David and Bob, add to that list. Bob has cited the major sort of professional ones. One that I would have added, and it was a bulky addition when I was heading 2 different schools. Today it's simple, and that is the local newspaper. I wanted to learn as much about the community I was moving into as I could. And today, of course, online with a subscription to the local newspaper, you can just identify and understand your new home and the school within it by learning about your new hometown.
Yeah, it's a good point.
David, do you have questions? Yet we could post some ourselves, but if you
nothing's come through yet, gang. All of our participants, as questions pop up, make sure to enter them in the Q&A box or enter them in the chat stream, and we'll collect those and deal with all the questions. So I think let's just keep pushing forward, David.
We're good. Every one of the points that Bob raised in his broad overview of the early transition could give rise to plenty of questions as well. And so if you think of them out there, please let us know. We'd be happy to address them. Maybe this is one that I have anticipated in a few of the things that I have written to you all, so that you have begun to think about it. Susan has agreed to address it for us right now. And it relates to the simple fact that for a while, maybe 6, 7, 8 months of time, you newly appointed heads will have 2 jobs. You will be eager to go to work at your new school at the same time that you have major responsibilities at your current school. And that is an especially delicate and important responsibility. I've asked Susan to think about this. When news of her departure was circulated at a school that she was leaving to go head another school, how did she reassure them that she was still on the job, that she was still the upper head school, or upper school head until the 30th of June? How did you make that work, Susan? Can you help us with that?
Thank you. I think the most important thing is to affirm that the work that's being done for that position is being done well. And what I mean by that is, you've got a search committee that's looking for your replacement, and just to be very positive about about that to your faculty, to your students, to your families, because they're nervous about it. They're about to meet a new person. And so it's so important that you are very positive about the work that they're doing, about the success of that next person, and that you're leaving notes for that person so that they can be successful. I think that if of all the things that I could say to you about that time between when you've been appointed the head of another school and when you have to kind of live out that last 2 months of the school year, is building up that next person so that the school is really excited about it instead of asking questions of worry. And so affirm that next person. The next thing I would tell you to do is to be present. You know, so many times when you and I have been in a position for a while, we get comfortable and we also get busy with the minutia of our jobs. And it takes us away from the things that, well, why we really started doing it in the first place. So what I'm saying is be present. Those times when, you know, you've missed a game, go to them. Enjoy those last few days and months that you're going to be at your school. Go out and do the carpool more. You know, so many times just when carpool starts, that's when you've got a meeting. And those last few months that you're going to be at the school, enjoy all those kinds of parts of your school. The reason why you went there in the first place.
Right.
And just being there. Here's another thing. When talking to people, be present. You know, there's so many things on our minds about, you know, that next job, and we're worried about getting everything done. Make sure that the people that you're working with now, those families and kids and faculty, know that you don't have one foot out the door. You're there, you're listening to them, and those kinds of things that they're worried about getting to, you know, finished before you leave, that you're actively working on that, and that you're listening to them and making sure that that next person is also, there's going to be a seamless transition between you and the next person. Bob brought up, I thought, a very good point, and that is about the transition notebook for you as you get that new job. Well, what about the transition notebook for the person who's replacing you? No one knows your job like you do. The ins and outs of the people you know, those connections, those real responsibilities behind the scenes. Make sure that you get the people in your department. If you're in the admission department, if you're you know, in any area, maybe you're the division head right now, get the people that you work with to make a notebook for the person who's coming in for you, because that's going to be so important. And hey, make a special effort to include a part of that notebook from you. And what I mean is those kind of anecdotes that say, you know what, you're going to love this place. And here is my phone number, and here is my private email address. And if you in the afternoon are at your wit's end about something, there's one person in this world who knows what you're going through, and I'll answer that phone and talk to you about whatever's troubling you that day. I think that that will bring such peace to the person who's taking your place. I know another thing that I would recommend to you, regardless of what job you have in leadership, is to stop every day and write 3 notes. Just 3 notes. One to a faculty member, one to a donor or a parent or a student. Get in the habit of writing a note of thanks to people. That's going to be important as you leave your position. You know, remember when you first got that job and that parent came in that you thought, oh my Lord, I am never going to be able to work with this parent. And now you're leaving, and that's one of the people who brought you a gift and said they're going to miss you so much. Well, that next person, they may have trouble with that same individual, and you will help them so much by writing a personal note to that mother or dad or student or whomever it is, reminding them about the journey that the two of you have had and how happy you are that that journey ended up on a good note and that you're sure that they'll do that for the next person. I think that that's going to be super important, that you take the time to write a handwritten note. They don't have to be long. And you just, put them in the faculty's box or wherever, but just taking the time to say, I really appreciated you and the work that we did together here for kids. And then I'd also say to you that you should also practice time management. I don't know how that happens, but let me tell you that as you go into that head job, you need to make sure that you've been practicing that. That's something that you're going to practice every day. And what do I mean by that? Well, I used to make an awful mistake. And I do mean awful. I wake up early in the morning. I have 6 children. And honestly, I got up early in the morning because it was the only time I had. And so I continued that as I got my, positions, division head, and then on into other jobs. And here I'd be up at 4:30 in the morning, just shooting out emails. I'm telling you, Kelly, I know you're listening to this, and I'm sure you're shaking your head. Yes, when Susie started as a head of school, I would send emails, and I didn't realize that their telephones were dinging away, and that made them get up. So if you try your best to practice time management so that your faculty doesn't feel like they need to get up at 4:30 in the morning, or if you stay late in the afternoon, try and not let anybody know, because the people who work with you, they have families and they need to be able to get home and not feel guilty about it. You and I are in the service of children, and our own children shouldn't be orphans because of it. So make sure that you practice that now in your job that you're in right now, before you go into that new head's job. I saw, a note come by in the chat on the side about, well, what if you're staying at your school? Well, I'm sure that Bob and David and maybe even David Madison have some advice for you too. But I would say to you, finish the job you have now first. And as people come to you asking you, like, what are you going to do and how's it going to be? I would say to them, I'm eager to work with you and I can't wait to be your head of school. But right now, we have a head of school and I'm going to refer you back to that person. Just being respectful like that will allow you to finish your year on a strong note and allow your head of school where you are right now to also end on a strong note. Anybody got something else to say?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've worked enough on the other side in the search piece with internal candidates, and so some of the response to that would reflect that. If you're an internal head, you're somebody moving on to headship from your current school. Unique advantages, obviously. You're a known quantity, and you have a series of relationships built that are invaluable. You just can't calculate the value of that. And you understand the comings and goings and the operational side of school life and so on. There are challenges, though. There are challenges because we all know how lonely headship can be. We have colleagues, we have networks, but when the buck stops with you, that creates it puts you on a little bit of an island, and it means for someone who has had this existing set of professional relationships in a school that those relationships may change. It's not to suggest they can't remain as productive as they've always been, but when the buck stops with you, all of a sudden you find yourself in a slightly different relationship with some of those folks, and I think that's something you have to understand and account for. David, you want to add anything to that on the internal side? Yeah.
Not to that. I wanted to thank Susan for her thoughts because she reminds all of us that as eager as we are looking forward as newly appointed heads and making sure that that transition is a smooth and productive one, we're also in our current position responsible for the transition that fills our place. And many of the things that you said, Susan, are about creating the right environment for the person who is going to follow you in that position. So I just think it's really, really well said and done. For whatever reasons, this was a big deal to me. I would, I told people as I was leaving one school and going to another that I will be at my desk at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on June the 30th. And I will be at my desk at 8 o'clock the next morning at my new school. The police are probably still chasing me down the highway as I raced from my old school to my new one. But I was just determined to do that. I thought, first of all, it seemed like the right thing to do. But I also wanted everyone to know how much I valued the school that I was leaving. I was very grateful for all the opportunities I had there, and I wouldn't be going to the new position had it not been for all the opportunities and experiences I had at my former school. So thanks for putting the focus on that, Susan.
David, let me throw out a question to the panelists. So in this stream, in following the idea of going from a current community into a new community, this is a question from a participant. The time between July 1st and the first day of school can be as short as 6 weeks. That is the case. What are the 1 or 2 things that are absolutely critical to accomplish before the faculty return? So coming into a new community, you've got a pretty short window before all hands are going to be on deck. If you were trying to identify the top 2 or 3 things that should be accomplished, how would y'all respond to that? David, we'll start with you.
One thing that was very important to me at both of my schools, my headships, was that I meet individually with each member of the faculty. If I had only 6 weeks to do that, I would probably have begun the process even during the latter days of the spring. Fortunately, I didn't have to do that. But I wanted to make personal face-to-face contact with all the members of my faculty before school began. I was also eager, if not individually, to meet with members of the staff, the buildings and grounds team, the clerical staff, the people in the kitchen. Boy, do you want to have a wonderful relationship with those who are the heart and soul of your school, who make the place work. So that was important to me. I'd say also, Bob touched on this earlier, but I had a first 100 days plan in place that took me from July 1 through the early fall that I knew almost certainly to the week, not necessarily to the day, all of the people, groups, organizations that I wanted to meet with. I wanted to meet with the mayor of our town. I wanted to meet with the principals of the other schools in the community. And so before the faculty arrived in August, we'll say, I have that plan clearly in place, so I knew exactly what I was going to do once school started. For Susan, you want to take it?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that we did, and I'm glad we did, was we had 2 retreats. We had a retreat with the senior administrative staff, well, actually, and mid-level administrative staff. It was a rather large gathering off campus where we could spend a lot of time talking about issues and learning about the school. More than that, really simply getting to know each other and to understand and respect each other. I never forget the athletic director on the heels of one of those things said, you know, the kids haven't set foot in the classroom and I feel like I know you. And that was important. That meant a lot. We also set up a board retreat and just focused on some key issues that were on the table at the time, but they hadn't done this. So those two retreats, I think, were a good way to sort of launch the year. And they took place in early August before the faculty were all back and obviously before school started.
I think that both of the things that David and Bob bring up are very important, and I would definitely do those. Having those retreats in the summer are of the utmost importance, and getting away from campus to have it is just so wonderful, where you begin to be really know each other as friends, and really have the time to listen and have some fun together. But I would also tell you that it's my opinion that the date you and I arrived for that job is wrong. It's just my opinion. You get there July 1 and nobody's there. I mean, during July is when everybody goes on their vacation.
Yeah.
I just did an interim headship last year in Louisiana, and I worked with the new head for that head to come in and start in June rather than July. That way, you know, you finish at your school and you can go ahead and get some things done while the head of school is still there. And then what I'm building up to tell you, you need some time off. And the time when you need to be off is when everybody's gone. And so what I'm saying is, during this springtime, while you're finishing your job at your school now, think about how you want to work your summer. Is it going to be possible for you to talk to your new board chair and say, can we change my arrival date to such and such? Maybe you want to go to one of the heads workshops that are offered by NAIS and many organizations across the country. You know, you need to time those things so that you have a summer too. Because believe me, my friend, that first year that you're at your new school, you are going to feel like a bug on the front of an 18-wheeler. All right? That year is going to fly by. And you're going to be hanging onto that windshield, just hoping that the windshield wiper doesn't throw you off. All right? So you need a summer where you are with your family, you're moving into a house, you're maybe traveling across the country. So make it about you too. And what helps you go into the fall relaxed and ready for your new job. So
Susie, following up on what are the one or two things that incoming head will need? Bridget wanted to ask that very question. I'd like to know the one or two most valuable professional resources that can help prepare for the new role. What comes to mind when you hear that question?
Well, I definitely think that your relationship with an organization, frankly, David, like SAES or
I'll write you a check for saying that afterwards.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. But also, you know, this didn't happen a lot when I started. You know, I'm 100 years old, so I can say it. They didn't have executive coaching when I started in my job. And so let me tell you something that was really stupid. I've had a meeting with my board chair, and my board chair walked in and said, "Hey, Susie, what are we going to do at our first meeting?" Heck, I thought I worked for them. What are you talking about, the first meeting? So that's what I'm saying. Being a member of an organization or having some executive coaching. Now that's that person who meets with you in the background, and Bob, he knows all about that, and I'm sure he'll talk to us about it before we leave. But taking advantage of having someone that you can have on the phone and call, I cannot begin to tell you how important that will be to you.
And to piggyback on that, because David, I know another plug for SAES, but I know that regional associations, certainly the national associations, are doing a lot with new heads these days. whether it's in the summer or in the fall of their first year. For me, just going to new heads, NAIS new heads. It was an instant network and support group, and just being together for that week and off campus again made a huge difference. And that was early July.
That's what I'm saying about your timing. You see, that meeting for NAIS is usually the last week of June or the first week of July. You need to think about your calendar so that you have that opportunity before school starts to relax. And I would highly recommend that you attend one of those if you can.
Yeah.
David, let me take a little bit of a detour here before we move toward the conclusion of this and speak to something that has come up in my mind as I've listened to Bob, and certainly has been on my mind from the start, because there are so many people who want a piece of you as you enter a new school for all kinds of reasons, almost all of them good. They want to email you or write you a letter or take you to lunch, or it's just a blizzard of people who want to have some time with you. And I would like to call attention to three individuals or three groups that you must give top priority to. I preface this by saying you're also going to get lots of letters and emails and congratulatory notes, and answer every one of those. Write a brief thank you note for those people, some of whom you may not have heard from for years, who all of a sudden will have heard of your appointment and write you a nice note. Acknowledge all of those and thank them because they're part of the team that got you to where you're going in the first place. That said, let me highlight these three individuals or groups that you want to give full attention to over the time between now and when you arrive at your new school on the 1st of July. First is your family, your spouse, your kids. As excited and anxious as you may be, they will be almost as excited, but probably a little bit more anxious than you are. And you want, because they're thinking about a new hometown, a new house, a new school for kids, perhaps a new job for your spouse, certainly a new role as the spouse at the head. You want to be very mindful and empathetic with them as you talk through what they can expect. These are not issues that you'll want to be dealing with for the first time in the summer or in the fall of your new position. You want them to be as well prepared for their new lives and their new relationship with you as they can be. So with all of your love and all of your attention to them, you will reassure them about the excitement that lies ahead. Second, Bob has already said this and made clear that it's a common theme. That's your relationship with your board chair. Everything that you've ever heard about the relationship between the board chair and the head of school is true by 100th power. It is the key relationship in a school. And so when you're visiting your new school, you should plan to spend a half day, even a full day, in conversation, even relaxed social conversation, dinner with the board chair and his or her spouse, with the four of you. Get to know that person as soon and well as you can as you prepare to enter your new work. The last one, Bob has said it well, I'll just reiterate it. That's the chair of the transition committee, who can tee you up, organize you, be your point person, be your funnel for calls and requests from your school. You do not want 25 different people from your new school calling you on the phone. You would like for one person, a highly trusted and well-regarded chair of the transition committee, to gather all of those calls, all of those requests for a meeting, whatever, to do that for you. That's a delicate balance, because that person has to be highly trusting and trustworthy at the school itself. And you certainly don't want to confine yourself to dealing only with him or her. But that's a person who can save you a lot of time and attention during this transition. I want to turn now to Bob, because a point that we all want to make is the importance of not doing this alone, not trying to bear all of this exciting work on your own shoulders, of being able to reach out and get support and help from others. And Bob, I'm going to let you talk about something we've done.
Sure.
With that.
Yeah, much of what we've been talking about, kind of transition best practice, is fairly broad in scope or in focus. It's about you and your school community and relationship with one another, and how you can collaborate to create this effective transition. Obviously, a well-conceived transition, well-planned, the way we're describing it, can make a huge difference for the school community and for the new head. It's a form of support, frankly, that search firms are providing more and more for the schools with whom they've done search work as an extension of their search services. However, some new heads, especially those who are new to the role, could think about an additional layer of support and may very well benefit from additional layers of support that can be difference makers, forms of support that focus squarely on them and their needs. The education group and other firms, but the education group has developed an executive coaching program. It's designed for heads who are new to the school, new to their schools. It assists with the transition process, and it provides really ongoing counsel and support. This program is highly customized, and it's one-on-one. It begins with that critical pre-entry period that I described a little bit earlier, and then it continues through the first year. We're talking about a relationship here that can last as long as 12 to 18 months. The special strength of this program is the breadth of counsel and the depth of coaching experience that our team of coaches, 10 in all, recently retired heads, they can provide direct and confidential one-on-one guidance for the school's new head. We can provide similar services, frankly, to senior administrative staff who are transitioning to new roles. But the work with the new head is based on a core curriculum, which is then tailored to meet the heads and the school's needs. We think it provides the kind of counsel and the kind of support that only an experienced former head of school could offer. We examine issues like governance and school identity and program development and enrollment and marketing, communications, community relations, all kinds of things, you name it. These are things that we focus on, as well as the day-to-day challenges of headship. And that's of huge value to the head of school. The goal is what everyone wants, and that is success for the new head. So the coaches council, the purpose of the coaching relationship is to help the new head develop his or her own distinctive leadership style and effectiveness. We don't have to tell you this, but I'll say it anyway, that being an independent school head is an incredibly difficult job, not just in terms of the time and the energy that's spent, but the number of hats you have to wear and wear them well. And so the task of the head of the coach is to help you understand all these roles, these many roles you play, whether it's the educational and moral leader, or the guardian of the mission, or the cheerleader, problem solver, crisis manager. It's to help you understand more about those roles and help you manage those roles. and also help you with developing these functional relationships that you need to have with all the school's constituencies. So the executive coach will utilize his or her own personal experience, will acknowledge best practices in the profession, and again, will help the head of school manage, tackle this multitude of tasks. The goal is to help the new head maximize your skills and talents and become the most effective school leader possible. And we do this through regularly scheduled consultation, 24/7 availability. We're there to establish this relationship of trust and confidentiality and candor that we hope is going to bring out the very best qualities in you, the new head. So it's worth giving some thought as to whether or not this kind of support would be especially valuable to you.
Thank you for that. We obviously, from where we view all of this, have come more and more to feel more and more passionately about the role that a mentor, a coach can play in this transition. That person can be the one person with no other agenda but the success of the new head. Everybody approaches leadership at a school with some idea, with some goals, some objectives of his or her own. You know, I want this to be the best athletic department in the state. I want my English department to be absolutely first rate. The executive coach has only one objective, and that is the success of the new head. And the way we've decided to do it is not only through a program, a curriculum, and regular meetings, but literally 24/7 availability to a new head. I can promise from my experience that there have been 3 or 4 o'clocks in the morning when I wished I could reach out to somebody and say, I've got to talk this thing through. I've got a meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and if you can give me an hour right now to talk about what I want to say to these folks, I would really appreciate it. And so that basically is what we've decided that we want to do, to offer to new heads in their work in the first year. When I took this on as the director of the program, I told Catherine Stewart, who's the wonderful head of the education group, I said, Catherine, I just think this is so important. I said, I would do this coaching for nothing. And she looked very kindly at me and she said, David, that does not make for a particularly good business model. And I understood that, and I still do. But I believe that if you're hearing the concern and the interest that we feel for this, that you will at least consider this as a possibility for you. I thought that we are happy, for example, to provide an hour on the phone with one of our executive coaches, an executive coaching session. If you'd like a sample of what it could be like, just let me know that. You can learn more about it on our website, but if you want to talk about it, email about it, write me at david@educationgroup.com, david@educationgroup.com, and we will do everything we can to be your support. Let us know how we can do that. We're eager to help. Thanks very much for joining us today. This has been a privilege for us to meet with this group. Included in it are 5 sitting heads who wanted to be part of this today, to hear what we are saying and even to share their wisdom with us and you down the road. So regard us as your support right now. Happy New Year. Good luck to all of you, and we hope that we will see you sometime soon.